Yeah, so I'm Owen Waters, and I'm a partner within our SAP practice, which is part of our larger technology transformation practice, and I've been with Investigo for about 5 years. He likes diggers, he likes cars, he loves our dogs. And I'm not sure how they feel about him all the time, but he's very excited to see them. And he's just a lovely little boy, to be honest. He's always smiling, he's always happy. I always describe him as a nice child to be around. And if he was sat in a room with you, you'd enjoy spending time with him. He's just a lovely little boy. Loves his food, supports Man United. Well, I'm not sure if he definitely knows that yet, but he definitely supports Man United. And yeah, just very lucky to have him in our lives. Adoption's never easy, and I don't think it should be easy for anybody, because it's a great responsibility that you're taking on. But we found it in some ways quite an enjoyable process, because it was a chance for us to kind of look back on our childhood, and luckily both of us are from good families and had nice childhoods. We looked back on our relationship, and we kind of talked about that and got to talk about each other and what we mean to each other, and how we can provide a secure environment for a child. So there was lots of really nice things about it, but it is quite in depth, and you go into a lot of detail, and you kind of, with your social worker, you tell them things that you never thought you'd tell anybody else but your partner probably. And you kind of get to know them very well, and they get to know you, and that's a real important part of the process. But I think probably the hardest bit is hearing of the stories of some of the children, and they have to prepare you for the worst case scenario, because they need to understand. A big part of adoption is understanding what you and your partner, or if you're just adopting on your own, what you feel that you can take on, which is really important, because it's got to work on both sides. Adoption, it's got to be right for the child, but you've got to be in a position where you can provide a family for this child, a secure environment, and it can't not work, or if it does, it's really not good for the child. So they need to be clear on what you are taking on, and some of the challenges and some pretty extreme cases that can come around. And that was really hard to hear. Now when I am a father, it's particularly hard to think about those sorts of things. But just any time you hear about children and some of the challenges and the difficulties they faced, your heart goes out to them. And so it's challenging, but there's a lot of good parts about it. It's very in depth. You have to go into it, full commitment, because it takes up a lot of time. It takes up a lot of emotional and physical energy. But obviously for us, it was completely worth it. We're potentially going to go back through the process again to adopt another child, hopefully, and I'm keen to do it again. And having had the experience, I certainly wouldn't put anyone off on it. It's not easy, but it shouldn't be easy. And I think it's a lot better as well, the process, than it potentially used to be. I think there's a lot more strict timelines, and there's a lot more swept up in terms of the process. So I think we heard some horror stories from years gone by, and it definitely wasn't the case for us. It was pretty structured. We hit most timelines, and some of it was enjoyable, some of it was difficult, but I saw a reason for everything we did along the way. The point of actually initially reaching out to an adoption agency started in July of last year, and we were approved in February to adopt. So usually try and keep the kind of initial bit, which is the kind of getting approved to adopt, to about 6 months. So we pretty much hit, not far off of that, to be fair. And some of the delays were due to COVID and bits and pieces, but we were pretty much on track. And then the bit that can take a bit of time is not usually necessarily the approval bit. It's quite often the being matched with a child after that, which can take, and I've heard people taking sort of 2 years for that process to go through. So it just all depends, but we were quite fortunate and pretty much stuck to the timelines. So Investigo have been hugely supportive throughout this whole process. I'll give Terry Dawson and Rich Brook a shout out here, my bosses, and they were hugely supportive, and Derek McKenzie as well, to be fair. All those guys are massively supportive throughout the whole process. even from the very beginning, where you can't actually start the adoption process until you have a second bedroom. And my wife and I at the time lived in London. We had a 1-bed flat. I made the call during COVID to Terry to say, I want to move up north. And a big part of the reason behind that is to have more space and be near family and friends, so we have a bigger support bubble, which again is something that the adoption process looks into in a big way. So they were great, and they massively supported that move, allowed me to be pretty much 100% remote. If they hadn't done that, we wouldn't even have been able to start the process. So from the outset, Investigo and my kind of management team were hugely supportive of that. Then throughout the process, there was a lot of kind of training days you have to do. There's you kind of have to meet with your social worker, and there's a period where it was pretty much kind of weekly, if not kind of every other day, I was having to have a meeting with the social worker, and sometimes it's for half an hour, sometimes it's for 2 hours. But again, Rich and Terry and the team at Investigo were just so supportive, where they weren't saying I had to take time off, or they weren't they were just, I said, listen, I can't join this meeting, or whatever it might be, I've got to do this, and they just let me crack on with it. And I think that's something with Investigo, where we reward people that work hard and give back to the business, that we all also give back to them. And the guys know that I'm going to work hard and make up my hours and make up the work at a later point. So they were hugely supportive, and just having that flexibility of being able to kind of jump in and out of meetings, and short notice, sometimes the social worker needs to speak to us about a certain bit of our report that she's putting together, and I just needed to drop everything and get on a call, or have a meeting, and the guys in Investigo were so supportive of that, which is amazing. Investigo have got good paternity leave. It's 2 weeks paternity leave, but I didn't want to use that during the meeting process before he actually comes to physically live with us. So I had a conversation with him, said there's a 2-week period here. It's going to be some hour here, hour there, maybe half a day, then full days, and kind of build up. And then I want to just take my paternity leave for 2 weeks. So I ended up taking leave before that, and then my paternity Investigo were so supportive, because I essentially pretty much had about 3 and a bit weeks off, and there was never a question about me doing that. There was never a question of, well, can you not just take your paternity leave now? They let me take my own leave. They actually, they said to me, listen, if it's only a morning or whatever, don't worry about it, just go and do it and come back and make the time up. And I never felt under any pressure from the team there. They took on the work that I had to drop, and they just cracked on with it. And that was absolutely invaluable in terms of, one, just it's quite a stressful period anyway, and kind of taking that work stress away from me, but also just allowing me to completely focus on meeting my son, and starting to build a relationship. And then those 2 weeks of paternity where I was just at home, completely focused on him, helping him settle in, but also my wife and I kind of get used to the whole fact that we now suddenly had a toddler landed on us. That was just, I can't ever repay that kind of the support that I got during that period. So yeah, absolutely fantastic. Genuinely, for me, I'll always be loyal to Investigo. They've been really good to me, but this has just made that kind of loyalty even deeper. And it's kind of, it's almost the kind of thing I don't know if I can ever repay the support that I've had from the company. So hugely supportive, and certainly anyone else that's going through this, or anybody that's joining the business who is looking at doing this, I would say you can't go wrong with Investigo in terms of the support and the help that they'll provide during this sort of quite challenging but also amazing period. I think it's going with your eyes open, and do as much pre-reading or research as you possibly can. But I think it's also not be daunted by the process. I think we were, we'd heard horror stories, and you hear it takes 3 years, and it's really, really challenging and difficult. And I don't think that's the case anymore. And maybe we were just lucky with our social worker, who was absolutely fantastic and hugely supportive. But and obviously we've had a really amazing outcome from it all. And don't get me wrong, there are challenges along the way, and you'll have difficult times, and it's not easy, and you have to put time aside for it, and you have to lean into it and really go for it. But it's not it's not an impossible process. It is very doable, and I think that's the main thing, is don't be put off by anything. do your research, understand what you need to commit to it, but know it's very, very doable. Speak to people that have adopted. That was probably one of the biggest things for us. Was we were, it's like anything, when you talk about something, you tend to just bump into people. When you speak, I was adopted, or we've adopted, and you just hear about people in your actual network you never knew were involved with that. So speak to people who have adopted. Talk to them about the process, because they'll be able to give you the kind of ground truth of what it's like, and it'll help prepare you for what's coming. But there's loads of great reading material out there about adoption. There's podcasts now. There's a really good one done by the BBC, a podcast on adoption. Go in there with good research, know what you've got coming up, but don't be put off by it, because I think a lot of people are put off by the length of the process, how in depth it is. But to be honest, it does flow, and before you know it, you're at the point where you're going to your final approval meetings, etc. And next thing you know, you've got like us, a wonderful little boy who's now your son. So it is 100% worth all the paperwork and all the meetings and all of that stuff. And that would be my biggest thing, to be honest, because I know my wife and I had moments where we were, God, this seems a lot, and but just speaking to other people who've been through it really put our mind at ease, and doing our research first, understanding it, because there's different ways you can adopt and bits and pieces. So understanding all of that is really useful. And I think probably the final bit as well is talk to your partner, because a big part of the adoption bit is what do you feel you can take on in terms of the child and their needs and what they've been through, and probably having that conversation early, and kind of being very honest with each other and yourself about where you are. And you may be someone who's had a family of your own, you're an experienced parent. You may be able to take on more than somebody who is coming into this at a younger age, who's never had much childcare experience, etc. So think about that. Think about what it is you can take on, and discuss that and have that open dialogue with your partner, or if you're adopting on your own, be honest with yourself about what you can do. But yeah, it's something you will never regret doing, and it is not as challenging or as daunting as it first seems when you go into it. So main thing is just do it, and just go for it, basically.